organised for the purpose of maintaining the Gaelic language, yet Gaelic Celtic customs and speech are rapidly vanishing before the approach of English civilization. So too, in Ireland, between the counties of Cork, Limerick, and Kerry, lay hitherto a wilderness wholly without passable roads, and serving, by reason of its inaccessibility, as the refuge of all criminals and the chief protection of the Celtic Irish nationality in the south of Ireland. It has now been cut through by public roads, and civilization has thus gained admission even to this savage region. The whole British Empire, and especially England, which, 60 years ago, had as bad roads as Germany or France then had, is now covered by a network of the finest roadways, and these too, like almost everything else in England, are the work of private enterprise, the state having done very little in this direction. Before 1755 England possessed almost no canals. In that year a canal was built in Lancashire from Sankey Brook to St Helens, and in 1759, James Brindley built the first important one, the Duke of Bridgewater's Canal from Manchester, and the coal mines of the district to the mouth of the Mersey passing, near Barton, by aqueduct, over the River Irwell. From this achievement dates the canal building of England, to which Brindley first gave importance. Canals were now built, and rivers made navigable in all directions. In England alone, there are 2,200 miles of canals, and 1,800 miles of navigable river. In Scotland, the Caledonian Canal was cut directly across the country, and in Ireland several canals were built. These improvements too, like the railroads and roadways, are nearly all the work of private individuals and companies. The railroads have been only recently built. The first great one was opened from Liverpool to Manchester in 1830, since which all the great cities have been connected by rail. London with Southampton, Brighton, Dover, Colchester, Exeter, and Birmingham, Birmingham with Gloucester, Liverpool, Lancaster via Newton and Wigan, and via Manchester and Bolton, also with Leeds via Manchester and Halifax, and via Leicester, Derby, and Sheffield, Leeds with Hull and Newcastle via York. There are also many minor lines building or projected, which will soon make it possible to travel from Edinburgh to London in one day. As it had transformed the means of communication by land, so did the introduction of steam revolutionize travel by sea. The first steamboat was launched in 1807, in the Hudson, in North America, the first in the British Empire, in 1811, on the Clyde. Since then, more than 600 have been built in England, and in 1836 more than 500 were plying to and from British ports. Such, in brief, is the history of English industrial development in the past 60 years, a history which has no counterpart in the annals of humanity. 60, 80 years ago, England was a country like every other, with small towns, few and simple industries, and a thin, but proportionally large agricultural population. Today it is a country like no other, with a capital of 2.5 million inhabitants, with vast manufacturing cities, with an industry that supplies the world, and produces almost everything by means of the most complex machinery, with an industrious intelligent dense population, of which 2/3 are employed in trade and commerce, and composed of classes wholly different, forming, in fact, with other customs and other needs, a different nation from the England of those days. The Industrial Revolution is of the same importance for England as the Political Revolution for France, and the Philosophical Revolution for Germany, and the difference between England in 1760 and in 1844 is at least as great as that between France, under the Ancien regime, and during the Revolution of July. But the mightiest result of this industrial transformation is the English proletariat. We have already seen how the proletariat was called into existence by the introduction of machinery. The rapid extension of manufacture demanded hands, wages rose, and troops of workmen migrated from the agricultural districts to the towns. Population multiplied enormously, and nearly all the increase took place in the proletariat. Further, Ireland had entered upon an orderly development, only since the beginning of the 18th century. There too, the population, more than decimated by English cruelty and earlier disturbances, now rapidly multiplied, especially after the advance in manufacture, began to draw masses of Irishmen towards England. Thus arose the great manufacturing and commercial cities of the British Empire, in which at least 3/4 of the population belong to the working class, while the lower middle class consists only of small shopkeepers, and very few handicraftsmen. For, though the rising manufacture first attained importance by transforming tools into machines, workrooms into factories, and consequently, the toiling lower middle class into the toiling proletariat, and the former large merchants into manufacturers, though the lower middle class was thus early crushed out, and the population reduced to the two opposing element, workers and capitalists. This happened outside of the domain of manufacture proper, in the province of handicraft and retail trade as well. In the place of the former masters and apprentices, came great capitalists and workingmen who had no prospect of rising above their class. Handwork was carried on after the fashion of factory work, the division of labor was strictly applied, and small employers who could not compete with great establishments were forced down into the proletariat. At the same time, the destruction of the former organization of handwork, and the disappearance of the lower middle class deprived the working man of all possibility of rising into the middle class himself. Hitherto he had always had the prospect of establishing himself somewhere as master artificer, perhaps employing journeymen and apprentices, but now, when master artificers were crowded out by manufacturers, when large capital had become necessary for carrying on work independently, the working class became, for the first time, an integral permanent class of the population, whereas it had formerly often been merely a transition leading to the bourgeoisie. Now, he who was born to toil, had no other prospect than that of remaining a toiler all his life. Now, for the first time, therefore, the proletariat was in a position to undertake an independent movement. In this way, were brought together those vast masses of working men who now fill the whole British Empire, whose social condition forces itself every day more and more upon the attention of the civilized world. The condition of the working class is the condition of the vast majority of the English people. The question what is to become of those destitute millions, who consume today what they earned yesterday, who have created the greatness of England by their inventions and their toil, who become with every passing day more conscious of their might, and demand, with daily increasing urgency, their share of the advantages of society. This, since the Reform Bill, has become the national question. All parliamentary debates, of any importance, may be reduced to this, and, though the English middle class will not as yet admit it, though they try to evade this great question, and to represent their own particular interests as the truly national ones, their action is utterly useless. With every session of Parliament the working class gains ground, the interests of the middle class diminish in importance, and, in spite of the fact that the middle class is the chief, in fact, the only power in Parliament, the last session of 1844 was a continuous debate upon subjects affecting the working class, the Poor Relief Bill, the Factory Act, the Masters and Servants Act, and Thomas Duncombe, the representative of the working men in the House of Commons, was the great man of the session, while the liberal middle class with its motion for repealing the Corn Laws, and the radical middle class with its resolution for refusing the taxes, played pitiable roles. Even the debates about Ireland were at bottom debates about the Irish proletariat, and the means of coming to its assistance. It is high time too, for the English middle class to make some concessions to the working men who no longer plead but threaten, for in a short time it may be too late. In spite of all this, the English middle class, especially the manufacturing class, which is enriched directly by means of the poverty of the workers, persists in ignoring this poverty. This class, feeling itself the mighty representative class of the nation, is ashamed to lay the sore spot of England bare before the eyes of the world, will not confess, even to itself, that the workers are in distress, because it, the property-holding, manufacturing class, must bear the moral responsibility for this distress. Hence the scornful smile which intelligent Englishmen and they, the middle class, alone are known on the continent assume when anyone begins to speak of the condition of the working class. Hence the utter ignorance on the part of the whole middle class of everything which concerns the workers. Hence the ridiculous blunders which men of this class, in and out of Parliament, make when the position of the proletariat comes under discussion. Hence the absurd freedom from anxiety, with which the middle class dwells upon a soil that is honeycombed, and may any day collapse, the speedy collapse of which is as certain as a mathematical or mechanical demonstration. Hence the miracle, that the English have as yet no single book upon the condition of their workers, although they have been examining and mending the old state of things no one knows how many years. hence also the deep wrath of the whole working class, from Glasgow to London, against the rich, by whom they systematically plundered, and mercilessly left to their fate, a wrath which before too long a time goes by, a time almost within the power of man to predict, must break out into a revolution in comparison with which the French Revolution, and the year 1794, will prove to have been child's play.